We have learned factoring out the greatest common factor, and we have learned how to factor by grouping when there are 4 terms. Now we're going to learn how to factor what's called a trinomial. So it has 3 terms, all right, and there are no common factors here. So x squared plus 7x plus 12, there's no common factor. There's no number that I can divide them by, and the x is not in every term. So we need a different way to factor this. All right. Here are your steps. Step 1, we're going to draw 2 sets of parentheses and fill in the variable. So I know that when I factor these, okay, in your notes it says when a equals 1. So what that means is the first term is just x squared. It has a coefficient of 1. There's no other number there. When I factor something that has a equals 1, I know that it's going to have 2 factors, all right, and they're both going to have x's at the beginning of them. Then we're going to figure out the numbers that need to go here so that if I distribute this out, I get x squared plus 7x plus 12. So I draw 2 sets of parentheses and fill in the variable. Next up is we're going to fill in this little x over here, and you can think of it as a puzzle that you are going to solve to figure out these numbers. So whatever number is where c is goes on the top, and those we are looking for numbers that multiply. Okay, so in this x puzzle I need a 12 up here, and then wherever b is, that's going to go on the bottom, and those we're looking for numbers that add. So I have a 7 there. Alright, so top is c and it's multiply, bottom is 7 and it's add. What I'm looking for to fill in these other 2 sides is 2 numbers that when I add them together I get 7 as the answer, and when I multiply them together I get 12 as the answer. So they add up to 7, they multiply to 12. Okay, next thing I need to do is determine the signs. So these numbers that I'm going to put in here, should they be positive, should they be negative, should they be different? Well, I'm looking for something that adds up to positive 7 and multiplies to positive 12, because all of the numbers in my original problem are positive. That means that both of these numbers need to be positive. Okay? If I add 2 positive numbers, I can get a positive number as the answer. If I multiply 2 positive numbers, I will get a positive number as the answer. So everything's got to be positive here. Okay, so now I have to actually figure out what these numbers are. What are numbers that multiply to get 12 as the answer and add to get 7? What I'm going to do to help me is just make a list of numbers that multiply to 12. So I know I can multiply 1 times 12, and that would give me 12 as the answer. I could also multiply 2 times 6 and get 12. Or I could multiply 3 times 4 and get 12. Alright, so these are all the numbers that I can multiply to get 12, but I'm looking for the ones that add up to 7. So hopefully you see that that would be 3 and 4. So if I multiply 3 times 4, I get 12. If I add 3 plus 4, I get 7. Those are the correct numbers, so what I'm going to do is put them in my parentheses. Alright, positive 3 and positive 4, plus 3 plus 4. It does not matter. I could have put the 4 over here and the 3 over there. Doesn't matter what order you put them in, alright, as long as we have the correct numbers with the correct signs. And then my final step is I'm going to check my answers by distributing. So we already talked about this. If I factor something, I can make sure it's factored correctly if it distributes, multiplies back out to the original problem. So I think that the answer to this problem is x plus 3 times x plus 4. So let's check if I distribute this, will I get x squared plus 7x plus 12 as my answer. So first thing I'm going to do, let me get a different color. I'm going to distribute my x's. So x times x is x squared. X times 4 is 4x. Okay, then I also have to distribute the 3. Remember, this is double distributive. 3 times x would be 3x. 3 times 4 would be 12. And I have my like terms here that I need to combine. So I get x squared plus 7x plus 12. That matches my original problem, so that means I factored this correctly. Okay, here's a second example, x squared plus 7x minus 6. So again, I'm going to draw my 2 sets of parentheses. I know that I'm going to have an x at the beginning of both of them. Alright, and then c goes to the top, so they have to multiply, alright, to negative 6. they have to add to b, so 7. So multiply to negative 6, add to positive 7. So when I'm trying to figure out my signs, if I'm going to need to multiply to a negative number, that means that one of my numbers has to be negative and one has to be positive. That's the only way I can get a negative number when I'm multiplying, is multiply a negative number times a positive number. So I need a negative number times a positive number that will equal negative 6, and when I add them together, it will equal 7. Alright, let's start with numbers that we could multiply to get negative 6 as the answer. Alright, we are actually going to pause here for a second, because this problem is not one that I want you to be able to do right now. So what I want you to do, actually, we are going to change the problem, and I'm going to make this a 5. Okay, so still the same concept, numbers that multiply to negative 6 and add up to positive 5. So again, I'm going to make a list of numbers that can multiply to 6. So I could do 1 times 6, or I could do 2 times 3. Alright, and remember, one of these is going to be negative. Alright, if I want my answer to be positive, it would make sense for me to make the smaller number negative. Alright, so the negative here needs to be on the smaller number so that I end up with a positive answer. So if I make this negative and this negative, make my smaller number negative. Negative 1 plus 6, that is 5. So there is my winner. So negative 1 and positive 6. It solves my x puzzle, so I'm going to fill them in. X minus 1, x plus 6. Okay, and again, you're going to multiply it back out to check your answer. So I want you to pause here and try that. Alright, if you distribute this back out, I get x squared plus 5x minus 6, which is what we had in the original problem, so we did it right. Alright, you have 2 more examples there in your notes packet. What I want you to do is pause here and try those 2 examples, and then you can come back and check your work. Okay, here's what you should have got for factoring these two, y minus 4, y minus 1, and then z minus 6, z plus 2. If you didn't get either of those and can't figure out what your mistake is, you need to put a star by that question so that you can ask at the beginning of class and get it figured out. Alright, last thing that we are going to do is we're going to use what we just learned about factoring to actually solve equations. So if you look at this, we have x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Alright, everything that we have learned about solving equations so far says that we have to put all of the x's together. But the problem is I have x squared here and just x to the first there. Those aren't like terms. I can't put them together. So I can't solve them the way that we have previously. Alright, so what we have to do here is use factoring to solve this equation. So to solve this, the first thing that I am going to do, if it's not already done, I am going to move everything to one side so that the equation is equal to 0. Well, this one is already equal to 0. Everything's over there. So step 1 done for us. Step 2 is going to be to factor. So I'm going to take this left side of the equation and I'm going to factor it. So I'm going to draw my x. I need numbers that multiply to 8 and add to negative 6. Alright, so if I have to multiply to a positive number but add to a negative, it means both of them have to be negative. Alright, let me draw my parentheses here. Alright, I know they're both going to be x. So I need numbers that multiply to 8, add up to negative 6. I'm going to do 4 and 2. Alright, negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. Negative 4 plus negative 2 is negative 6. So I can fill those in. X minus 4, x minus 2. And this is still equal to 0. So I just factored the left side. Now, what happens, because of that x squared term in there, we actually get more than one solution to these problems. So in the past, everything we did with the equal sign, it only had one answer. If x was equal to 4, it could only be 4. Now there's going to be more than one number that x could potentially be. So what we're going to do is take each factor, each set of parentheses, and we're going to solve it like it was its own equation. So I'm going to take the first set, x minus 4 is equal to 0, and then the second set, x minus 2 is equal to 0. And I'm going to solve both of those equations. So here I would add 4 to both sides. So x is equal to 4. Alright, over here I would add 2 to both sides. So x is equal to 2. So now x equals 4 or x equals 2. Either one of these will give me a true statement up here. So there's two different solutions to this one problem. Alright, so we're putting together some different things that we learned. Get 0 on one side, so everything else is on the other. Factor it, which we just learned. And then, going back to chapter 2, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Okay, you have 2 more examples there in your notes. I want you to try them on your own, and then we'll go over the answers in class. Alright, that's it. Make sure you write down any questions in your notes or type them in on the Google form that you're about to go fill out.